You voted for it, here it is. Far Cry 1. Developed by Crytek themselves, which is pretty surprising given that they're mostly known as engine developers, with Crysis and, more recently, Hunt Showdown being the only notable games they've developed. Anything else they've made are pretty minor or inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. Let's be honest, they're engine developers. They exist to sell CryEngine. And so going into playing Far Cry 1, I thought to myself, is this going to be a real game, or is this going to be just a tech demo for the CryEngine? And I'll admit, I was a little surprised, but not in the way you'd think. Far Cry 1 is nothing like the rest of the series. It's actually a linear level-based game, but with a series of mini sandbox levels, interspersed with the normal hallway shooter type levels that you would expect from a linear game. So the question is, of course, is it any good? Is it worth playing after all these years? Let's find out. But before we get into this, do the things the algorithm likes. You all know what that means. Check out my Patreon if you want to support me directly. And without further ado, let's check out the birth of one of Ubisoft's most popular franchises, Far Cry. Gameplay-wise, you're probably never going to play a shooter exactly like Far Cry 1. It is a very strange experience. As the series later became known for a mixture of stealth and action, actually blended fairly well compared to most other sandbox games. That obviously began with this game, but the stealth is very, very clunky, to say the least. Let's begin with detection. One of the most simple stealth mechanics, dating all the way back to Thief, they knew how to do correctly. Well, Far Cry doesn't, really. Because you have a detection meter in the lower left corner. Tiny, tiny little detection meter that you're hardly going to notice unless you're actively looking at it. Doesn't even make a sound effect when somebody starts seeing you. And enemy sight range is so long in this game, which is realistic. Let's be real here. It's so long that you won't hear the prompt for an enemy starting to detect you most of the time. They're too far away for their dialogue to be heard. And while there is a machete and a silenced MP5, which we'll get to later, other than those two weapons, there's nothing silent in this game. So stealth is very difficult to actually pull off effectively. And yet at the same time, it's highly necessary for this game. Because, first of all, the enemies don't miss, period. Now, I do want to say, before I get further into this, I played this on challenging, which is essentially hard, right? But there's two more difficulties above that, veteran and realistic, which there's no fucking way I'm going to try either of those. Just no, because challenging is more than challenging enough, let me tell you. The amount of times I died in this game is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And unlike a lot of PC shooters, there's no quick save. And yeah, for the 5 of you who've played this, I already know what you're thinking. There is a popular mod that adds a quick save, fixes some minor AI bugs, and a few other minor quality of life improvements. But that's cheating. If I'm gonna beat this game, I'm gonna beat it natty, alright? I'm sure some of you out there are just thinking, well, it's just a game. If it pisses you off that much, maybe you should just download the patch, right? But no, I'm sticking with my guns, dude. I have to finish this the way it came out, no matter how unbalanced and stupid it becomes. Because as I was saying, the enemies are incredibly accurate. It's just that one, bullets travel incredibly fast, even though it's projectile based instead of hit scan. They're realistic bullet speeds, so it's not like you can dodge them. This isn't Apex Legends, where the fucking bullets don't even make any goddamn sense, they move so slow. They probably wouldn't even be able to fly through the air. And on challenging, you die in like 5 bullets without armor, and 10 with armor, which at close range means you fucking die instantly. So many deaths, man. So many. And some of those checkpoints are just brutal. If you do decide to play the game after this, don't be me. Just download the patch, okay? Some of those checkpoints are just way too unforgiving. So there's also a binoculars mechanic in this game, but it's basically useless because it doesn't actually mark the enemies on your screen. It only marks them on the compass. And the compass's range is only 25 meters. So most of the time you can't even tell where the enemies are. So I basically never used it. So essentially stealth in this game should be treated as an opening salvo. You know, you can take out a couple key enemies like the sniper or the rocket launcher guy. Especially go for the fucking rocket launcher guy. They're ridiculous. They don't miss. And it only takes 3 rockets to kill you, which I know sounds like a lot, but if it was 1 rocket, this game would basically be impossible. So I'm glad it's 3. And on the other end of the stealth scale, there's actually a way to completely break it, which was the aforementioned MP5 SD, which is completely busted. I don't know what it is with stealth games and having these unrealistic movie silencers that just make something completely silent, essentially, right? Which, don't get me wrong, the MP5 SD is actually pretty fucking silent in real life. But from a gameplay perspective, this thing is just busted, man. Headshot, 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 they're all dead. I carried the MP5 SD as long as I possibly could throughout the game. Which kind of brings me to the aiming and shooting mechanics, because this is the other thing that makes Far Cry completely unique, is that standing up or strafing, you're completely inaccurate. Hip fire is worthless standing up, completely useless. You can't hit shit. Anything further than 100 feet, no, you ain't hitting anything. And so that's where the 2 aiming mechanics come in, which this will sound familiar to people who played, like New Vegas, and there's some other shooters like this as well. But Far Cry kind of takes it to an extreme, which is 1, aiming, which unfortunately anything that doesn't have a scope, you don't actually aim down sights, the game just zooms in slightly, and adds a weapon sway effect, which is kind of annoying. And more importantly, crouching and going prone. Now, essentially, crouching is required to hit anything, right? But it's also still not ideal. At least if you're not firing in bursts or semi-automatically. No, if you want to actually hit things in a spray, you've got to go prone. And prone is ridiculous. You can hit anything. Your accuracy is perfect from any range. You practically don't even need a sniper until the late game, where enemies can actually take multiple headshots, which is very fucking annoying, I can tell you that. But so, what this ends up creating, because going prone is so powerful, other than the fact that you can't really move, which is obviously its biggest weakness, is that it's a drop shot meta. This is basically a modern Call of Duty trainer. Which is kind of hilarious in a way, but that's what I was thinking the entire time I was playing this. That whenever I play the next Call of Duty, I'm going to be much fucking better, because I'm going to be used to hotkeying prone on 1 button and just drop-shotting every motherfucker, you know? It is too effective. It is way too effective. Because unlike a lot of other FPSs, going prone actually does change your hitbox. So enemies have trouble hitting you, yet you can hit them in the head pretty much perfectly from any range, at least on PC. Which you're gonna need to, because enemy body armor in this game is another thing that's cranked to the max. In the late game, they can take an entire magazine of bullets to the chest. It is ridiculous, dude. It is painful. This is an aim trainer, a Call of Duty trainer. It's probably useful for some other FPS, I don't even know, but that's probably the biggest thing I got out of this game. Which brings us to the weapon balance itself. You don't exactly have a very large range of weapons in this game, but I think there's just enough to give you some variety. And you can hold 4 weapons, which is definitely better than the 2 that's in most modern shooters. And the fact that this game actually has, you know, health packs and armor and shit makes it feel much more like a boomer shooter than a modern shooter, which is pretty great. I've always preferred static health being a thing over regeneration. But so yeah, there's only a handful of weapons. We've got the M4, P90, MP5 SD, AW50, Desert Eagle, and G36 are all pretty standard weapons. You know exactly what they do, you've used them in plenty of other games. The only notable thing is the G36 has an underbarrel grenade launcher, and like I said, the MP5 SD breaks the stealth. But that brings us to our 3 somewhat unique weapons. There's the RLX 9157 rocket launcher, which actually is a sci-fi weapon in this, completely original, which is basically supposed to be an even more absurd version of the M202 incendiary Vietnam War rocket launcher, been featured in a lot of 80s movies. And yet it is surprisingly the most useless weapon in the game once you get the G36 or the OICW, which we'll get to in a second. Because enemies can actually survive a rocket to the face in this game, which is really stupid, but yeah, because of how body armor works, explosive weapons are only useful against vehicles, with the exception of the grenade, which seems to be a little bit more effective against enemies for some reason. Then we have the Pancor Jackhammer. Very strange, essentially sci-fi-ish gun, or at least it looks like one, because it's not really a real gun. There was only 2 prototypes ever produced. It's a fully automatic shotgun, which, I mean, that pretty much tells you why it was never really produced. But obviously in a video game, it's awesome. Easily the best close-range weapon, though there's only a couple levels in the game that have a lot of close-range areas in them. But it's always worth just keeping it in a slot once you pick it up, since you got 4 slots. Then we have the XM29 OICW, which is possibly the coolest real sci-fi weapon ever that wasn't really made, right? I highly recommend watching the Forgotten Weapons video on this one. This thing is just fucking awesome. It's a grenade launcher with a rifle attached to it. And no, I didn't say that wrong. It's a grenade launcher first, basically. And in the game, it's awesome. It's got a 3x scope. It's about as accurate as the G36. The grenade launcher component can hold up to 5 grenades. And the grenades launch way farther than the G36's attached one. Because I guess in an attempt to actually keep it true to real life, they're 25mm airburst grenades. So essentially they fire kind of like a mortar in a sense. And actually, much like real life, they're not very useful against enemies at all. But against vehicles, they're awesome. So this is the only explosive weapon you need, is the OICW, and it's also pretty much tied with the G36 as the greatest rifle in the game, with better magazine capacity as well at 40 rounds. So yeah, this is just basically the perfect real sci-fi weapon for the game, and it's very fun to use for obvious reasons. Another way this differs from other shooters is that the heavier weapons actually slow down your strafe speed, and there's multiple degrees to this as well. Obviously the handgun and machete slow you down the least, SMGs slightly more, assault rifles slightly more than that, and then the rocket launcher and sniper slow you to a crawl. It is actually painful. So I hope you remember your hotkeys for each weapon, because if you're just cycling through them, you're accidentally going to slow down to half speed and get killed. Happened to me many times. And so eventually what this is going to look like is you're just going to be sniping with either the sniper itself, or if you're out of ammo for it, which you will be because they don't give you that much, then you're just going to use the OICW or G36 and go prone and just headshot everybody. And that's pretty much the entire game, right? But there is one other thing, one major difference that separates this Far Cry from the rest of the franchise. There's a mutant element to this game. Because believe it or not, what this game is actually about, for what little story there is that there's this evil scientist guy and he's making super mutants, essentially, right? And the super mutants definitely change up the gameplay a decent amount. One of them is essentially straight out of Doom 3. He has a fucking huge gun arm. He can absorb bullets for days. Really annoying, actually. his model even looks like it was straight out of Doom 3. Which, as much as I don't like Doom 3, it's still kind of cool in a game like this. If he had less health, then it would be an awesome addition, but really, he can absorb a ridiculous amount of punishment. Then you have like the Super Leapers, aka like the stealth class of them. And this is where the AI actually slightly impressed in this game, even though it is highly annoying at the same time, is that these guys will essentially wait in bushes for you to walk by and then just fill you full of lead. Or they'll like jump to these high up positions where, you know, obviously they have the advantage, because they can jump like 50 feet in the air. It's ridiculous. And then some of them even have cloaking, like natural invisibility, that you have to use your thermal for. Which, the thermal goggles in itself are very, very necessary in this game, because you have to react to things so fast to not die, that you just need to know who the enemies are and what's the background as quickly as possible, you know? So obviously your thermal goggles, you're going to be using that constantly as soon as you get them. And also there's mutants that are just straight up monsters. They can also leap fairly far, and they just run up and just bite you in the face, essentially, or claw at you. And yeah, these things look kind of disturbing. They're supposed to be chimpanzees, but they don't look anything like what they were mutated from. The only other major aspect of this game that matters is the level design. And the level design is decently strong depending on the level. I would say all of the sandbox levels are pretty solid, especially since they really work well with the stealth gameplay, as you have plenty of room to, you know, go on a hill somewhere, go prone behind foliage or something, and start picking people off, right? But the problem is, for every one of these levels, there's also sort of a mini level of just corridors, and those suck for like a lot of reasons. The main reason being that the enemies don't miss, like I said earlier, so they can kill you instantly if you get too close to them. So you've either got to react faster, which this is the AI we're talking about, they can react as fast as they need to react, which is just bad design, of course. Or you've got to hope you can actually sneak up on them, which there's not always an opportunity to do, unfortunately. Because another stealth element is sound. Unfortunately, it's extremely basic, you know. If you're standing, you know, they'll hear it from far away. If you shoot a bullet, they'll pretty much hear it infinitely. And if you're crouching, they'll still end up hearing you from as far as 20 to 30 feet away, right? You can't exactly sneak up directly behind somebody. And I think going prone is silent, but I never got close enough to test that. And so yeah, these levels just aren't fun for the most part. Not that hallway shooters were ever really that fun. I mean, it's okay to have a level like that every once in a while, but if almost half your game is hallways, that's not very fun. But a lot of these open levels are actually pretty creative. Like, there's one that's essentially an island hopping level, where you have to take a boat to go between these islands and blow up all these radio towers, and it feels like something straight out of Far Cry 3, honestly. And so moments like that really make this game shine, even graphically to a degree, because despite coming out in 2004, this game looks like a PS3 game, except for the character models. Those look pretty shit. But the world itself looks pretty nice, actually. And I guess that's what Crytek are known for, right? Having the best possible graphics. Another great level is there are a bunch of treetops that you have to explore. And this is right as the mutants start getting introduced into the game. And it looks just really nice aesthetically. I like it. I guess the last thing to touch on is the story, which does not matter at all. Jack Carver is a fucking idiot. He sounds like a bad parody of an 80s action hero, with none of the good one-liners.
Doyle, unless you give us the antidote, you're not leaving this island alive. Now, I know you won't believe me until I've got a gun pointed at your head, but it's true.
Man, you are one pathetic loser.
And nobody else in the game really matters. There's a CIA chick you gotta help out. There's this scientist guy who betrays you in the end, which, who cares that I just spoiled that? You're not gonna care about the story, I promise you. The final boss fight is complete ass. You essentially get trapped behind this tiny desk, and if you peek up, 3 people instantly start shooting you and just gun you down instantly. And so what did I do to beat this after several tries? All I did was back up to the far end of the room, go prone, and headshot everybody. You know, like I did the rest of the game. The final boss didn't even know what to do. He basically couldn't even hit me, and yet I could hit his head from where I was laying down. So it's like the game didn't know how to deal with this, despite it being basically the only way to play the game. Yeah, not great. Before I end this video, I do want to briefly talk about Far Cry Classic, which unfortunately I did not play because 1, I don't want to buy this again, but also 2, it is very similar, but it's not a remaster. That's the interesting thing. It's actually a remake, but it's a remake that downgrades certain aspects of the game. It's very strange. From what I can tell, it is the superior version of the game overall, as it adds a lot of the HUD elements and tweaks some of the mechanics to be more like Far Cry 3 in the best way possible. Like, for example, you can actually aim down iron sights. The only problem is they didn't code it to work the same way as aiming does in the original version of the game. So it actually doesn't make your weapons more accurate, which is very strange. They also improved the binoculars mechanic to work like Far Cry 3, so now you actually have a reason to use it. That's a pretty significant upgrade. Enemies have less health, and body armor is less effective. Enemies have less accuracy, reduced senses and reactions, which arguably might actually be a bad thing if you like realistic stealth. And there's also a few other minor tweaks. However, then we have the downsides of this version. First, pretty much all physics have been removed, because, believe it or not, the PS3 and 360 didn't have enough RAM to actually handle the physics in this game. The draw distance is reduced, swimming animations for each weapon have been removed. So yeah, if none of that matters to you, then I guess Far Cry Classic is a straight upgrade. And honestly, just reading this list here and watching gameplay, it seems like the best version of the game. So the next time we talk about Far Cry, I'll probably talk about Far Cry 2, which is the real birth of this franchise if you ask anybody who's played it. And I've never played it myself, so I'll have to see if it lives up to its cult classic status that it's earned over time. Though believe it or not, Far Cry 1 did get a strange downgrade port on the original Xbox and a direct sequel called Far Cry Instincts and Far Cry Instincts Evolution, which apparently were much more linear games. And honestly, I've never even heard of these games before a commenter told me about them. So I might try to check them out if I can get an Xbox emulator running it. So we'll see, maybe that's worth like a side episode. So yeah, basically the verdict here is, it's pretty good. It's worth playing for under $10, I'd say. And that's the benefit of playing old games, is you can get them cheap. So, I guess the only real thing here is that it's not really going to cater to a lot of Far Cry fans, because it's nothing like any of the other games in the series. But it is interesting. I think the mutants alone in it made it worth playing for me. I just like that light sci-fi element. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thank you to all my patrons. I gotta remember to keep fucking saying that, because I haven't said it in a while. Gonna tackle Witcher 1 next. I'm sure I'll have started playing it by the time this video releases. Then I'm gonna try and finish up the rest of the content I need to do for Resident Evil 5, because that game has so much to do, and it's not that I'm doing it just, you know, for no reason. I do enjoy completing all the shit. I used to be a completionist, you know? And so I'm trying to experience all the game's content so I can talk about all the game's content. And yeah, just generally having a good time. After that, I may take a week off, as I've been saying. Or before Resident Evil 5 even. I don't fucking know. Either way, I'm going to try and figure out a system that doesn't leave me burnt out. I got to play some more games just to play games, you know? I don't need to talk about every game I play on this channel. I was starting to get into a habit of every time I played a new game, oh, I'll make a video. And it's like, nah, you don't always have to do that. Alright, well, this video's probably gone on long enough at this point. I'll see you guys next time.